Hey, Sam here from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making manicotti. So today's recipe is one of my favorite meals to enjoy during the winter time. You know, when you want something hearty and cozy, and even though this recipe is incidentally vegetarian, it is really a nice hearty meal. This is a great one for making during Lent. It's very similar to stuffed shells, except we're obviously going to be using manicotti noodles, and it comes together pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll want your oven preheating to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to start by cooking our manicotti noodles. So you do really need a manicotti noodle for this. If you can't find them, grab shells, jumbo shells, and head over to my stuffed shell recipe instead. But you're looking for this long, sturdy, large tube-shaped noodle. You're going to need 8 ounces for this recipe, which should be 14 of these noodles. So we're going to first grab a large pot and we're going to fill this with some water, add a sprinkling of salt, and bring this to a boil. Then once it's boiling, we're going to add our noodles, and we're going to want to cook these a little bit less than your package tells you. Now my box usually says to cook for 7 minutes. I'm only going to cook for 5 or 6 minutes and no longer. This is because I want them to be a little bit undercooked so they're still sturdy and easy to fill without tearing, whereas if I cook them too much, they're just going to be really slippery and difficult to work with. And when we cook them in the oven, they're going to end up overcooked and mushy. Go a little bit short of what your package says. Give the pasta a gentle stir a couple times while it's cooking, just so the noodles don't stick together or stick to the bottom of the pot. Now, as soon as they're done cooking, we're going to go ahead back over to the sink, drain them immediately, and run the noodles under cold water. This is to stop the cooking process. So while the pasta noodles are cooking, I will either start getting everything measured out for my filling, or I'll start mixing it together if I already have it ready. This comes together super quickly as well. We are going to be starting with our ricotta cheese. You want to use whole milk ricotta for this recipe, at least that's my preference, and you're going to need 24 ounces. Now, most of the time in my grocery store, I can find a 24-ounce container. If you can't, just grab that 32-ounce container, and you'll want to measure out 3 cups. Don't use the 15 or 16-ounce container. You're not going to have enough to fill all of your shells, unless you are supplementing with some veggie or some meat, then that would probably work just fine for you. All right, so this is 24 ounces of whole milk ricotta. Ooh, isn't that lovely? Going right in the bowl. And my secret ingredient that I think makes my manicotti better than any other one I've tried, obviously I'm a little biased, is a bit of cream cheese. We're using a full fat cream cheese. You'll need 4 ounces, which is like half a brick. You want this to be softened enough that you can, easily indent it and spread it. I'm going to drop this in with my ricotta. That's 4 ounces. All right, I'm going to go ahead before I add the other ingredients and just kind of mush up this cream cheese, because I want to make sure it is nice and softened enough, because if it's not, if it's still cold in the center, then it's going to be difficult to nicely combine everything and it's going to be lumpy. So I'm just smashing that cream cheese against the side of the bowl and stirring it into my ricotta before I add anything else. So the cream cheese really adds a very nice depth of flavor, which again, it just sets this recipe apart. But it also doesn't make it taste super cream cheesy. I have family members who don't love a strong cream cheese flavor, and they still love this recipe. It's just like a subtle depth of flavor, like I said, a secret ingredient. All right, next up, we're going to add some cheese. For this recipe, you need 2 cups of mozzarella cheese, shredded mozzarella cheese, but we're gonna divide that. So only 1 cup is going into this mixture. And I did shred my own cheese for this recipe, though this is probably one of the recipes where you can get away with using the, store-bought bag pre-shredded cheese. I think that would be okay. This will just be a little bit meltier and, in my opinion, tastier. We're also going to add a half cup of grated parmesan. Again, I really do recommend grating this yourself, because then you get the pure Parmesan cheese. You don't have the added ingredients. We're also going to add a large egg, which is a nice binder for this recipe. It helps keep the filling from being too soupy. If you are someone who can't have eggs and you opted to leave it out, you're just going to have a runnier filling. So it's just something to be aware of. Drop this in here. We're also going to add some garlic for flavor. I'm going to press this garlic. You could mince it, but then you'll have really small pieces of garlic. Just cut off the ends and peel it first. But if you mince it, you'll have small pieces of garlic mixed into your filling. It's fine, it's not a big deal. Pressing it is just easier for me. If you have a garlic press, I would press it. I recommend 2 cloves, but if your cloves are really small, use 3 or even 4. Just crack it a little bit to get that peel off. That's always the most frustrating part when it comes to garlic. If you just gently smash it, it makes it a lot easier to remove. Just use my garlic press and press this garlic right into the bowl. Use your knife to make sure you get all of that in there. Get rid of that extra skin. Clove number 2. All right, we'll also add some herbs and spices. Parsley, I usually use fresh parsley. If I have it, you'll want 3 tablespoons of finely cut up fresh parsley, or you can use a tablespoon of dried. If you have fresh basil, that would be great. I would probably cut up a couple of leaves nice and small, but I'm just using dried basil. You'll need a teaspoon of dried basil, a half teaspoon of dried oregano, a half teaspoon of table salt, and a half teaspoon of ground black pepper. All right, go ahead and stir everything together. Break up that egg yolk before you do. If you want to lightly scramble that before you add it, it'll make it even easier for you. Just make sure everything is nicely incorporated. Also, if your egg is room temperature, it's going to be easier to combine, but it's not a deal breaker if it's cold. This is going to be so good. Pasta and manicotti, most Italian types of food, something I pretty much never order when I go out to a restaurant because honestly, I feel like I can just make it better at home. And then everything is, well, these noodles aren't from scratch, but everything's usually from scratch. And I guess I'm just a little bit of a snob when it comes to it. So I'd rather just order something else. All right, everything's nicely combined. Let me grab my shells. They did finish cooking. I'll keep them on standby. We'll need them in a moment. So getting the filling into the shells. This can be a little bit tricky. You could use a spoon, use one smaller than this, and spoon the filling in. I think it's easiest to use a piping bag. You could use a large Ziploc bag with a small corner snipped off. That would also be fine, but if you have a piping bag, or I really like these disposable piping bags, I use them pretty often, that will really make your job easy. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this filling into my piping bag, which, if you're wondering about the glass, frosting, manicotti filling, whatever, anytime you need to fill a large piping glass by yourself, or a piping bag by yourself, grab a large cup, large glass, put the bag in there, fold the sides over, so much easier. Go ahead and spoon this in. It really does smell good. Using pressed garlic instead of garlic powder really does make a nice difference. I will put some notes over on my website in case you're looking to add like spinach or meat to this recipe because it's very versatile. You could do either of those things. Let's grab our baking pan. I am going to be using a 13x9 baking dish. Glass or ceramic is best. So next thing you need is marinara sauce. You can use my homemade marinara. That's awesome. You'll need 2 cups, or if you use store-bought, it's a fine short cup. We are going to layer 1 cup of this sauce into the bottom of the pan, and we'll spread this evenly. May go up the sides a little bit just to help prevent the pasta from sticking. All right, let me go ahead and snip off a corner of this bag. You don't want to make the hole too big or it's going to make your filling kind of sloppy. So messy for you. There we go. I'm not ready to use this just yet. All right, let's grab our manicotti noodles. These should feel a little bit firm, maybe even to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't cook them enough. Don't worry, they're going to cook in the sauce. And we are going to go ahead and fill them. Try to do it so you get a good view on camera. So I'm just going to insert the tip as far as I can without tearing the manicotti noodle. And just fill it. You don't want to overfill. You do want to fill it all the way. Not really a great way to showcase this on camera. Oh, don't sneak out. All right, and then we're going to place these in our pan. You're going to notice there's a wider way to layer the manicotti and a skinnier way. Arrange them so that they are skinnier in the pan. That way they all fit. If you put them flat like this, you're not going to have enough room. So set them up like this, if that makes sense. Fortunately, none of these have torn, but if they do tear, I usually just make them work anyway. I feel like most of the time you can find a way to make them work. You could even layer them kind of like lasagna noodles. Once you run out of that room across, just start layering them on top like this. I usually have 10 across and then 4 on the top like that. This one wants to be a little tricky. My last one. I have a teeny tiny bit of filling left over. We are in good shape. Clean my hands. Okay, next, grab the rest of your marinara. Remember, we should have a cup left, and we're just going to spread that over the manicotti. All right, let's go ahead and spread the sauce over top. And I do like to kind of drop a little bit of sauce between the noodles, so I'm just dipping my spoon in just to help keep them from sticking too much, or keep them from sticking. A little sauce in between will make it a little easier to get the manicotti out, which is never a neat process, but it's fine. The best food, it doesn't have to be pretty, just has to taste good. And we have our last cup of mozzarella cheese. Let's sprinkle this over top. If you wanted to sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan here too, I would not hold that against you. That would be nice. I'm so excited to eat this. Okay, before we bake this, we're going to cover it with foil. We do not want it to dry out. Grab a little bit of foil. If you have a shallow pan and you're worried about your foil touching the cheese, I would recommend lightly greasing your foil with like just a little bit of oil or a little bit of butter. That'll keep it from sticking. My pan's pretty deep, it's not going to stick. So just going to put my foil over top. And our oven should be 375 degrees Fahrenheit by now. We're going to pop this into the oven in the center rack. It's going to cook for 25 minutes with the foil on, then we'll take the foil off and we'll cook it for another 10 minutes until the cheese is nice and melty and it's a little bit bubbly. All right, I do like to let this cool just a little bit before we dig in. The hotter it is, the messier it is, the more likely you are to splash yourself, but I just don't have a lot of patience when it's my lunchtime, so I'm gonna go ahead and dig in right now. And that is how you make my favorite manicotti in the world. I'm really excited for you to try this one. When you do, let me know what you think, because I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. This is like the best lunch. It's really good.